Recently, the world watched in surprise the lightning collapse of the government of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad only a few years after the Arab country emerged from a foreign-sponsored campaign of militancy with the help of Iran and Russia. In a little over a week, Assad saw his government fall as militants launched an offensive from the northwest, followed by a parallel offensive from the southern front. As militants marched on Damascus, Syrian forces abandoned their posts and left behind arsenals. Assad also left the country and sought refuge in Russia. In this episode of In a Nutshell, we take a look at the reasons why the Assad government collapsed so easily and so quickly. Syria once fought off the same multinational militants who unleashed a similar campaign of destruction and death in the country in 2011 with all-out support from the US, Israel, Turkey, and their regional Arab allies. The game changer in about a decade of war in Syria was the presence of Iran and Russia at the request of the Assad government. In that period, Iranian military advisors bolstered the standing of the National Syrian Army during the war, while Russia deployed forces there and provided air cover to Syrian forces fighting on the ground. This time around, however, we saw no Iranian involvement and no meaningful Russian intervention when the militants began their push, because, as Iranian officials revealed, the Assad government did not ask for help. Assad appeared confident that he could protect Syria, but the situation dramatically spun out of control. Leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, revealed that Iranian intelligence services had warned Assad of militant movements months prior to the events, but it appears that those warnings had fallen on deaf ears. The leader also cited the lack of morale among the Syrian forces as one of the factors that led to the collapse of the Damascus government. Meanwhile, Assad's Syria was under heavy US and European sanctions for its alliance with Iran against Israel. Observers believe that Assad's failure to manage the consequent economic woes as well as widespread corruption among the army forces played a significant role in the Damascus government's incapability to defend the country. In the post-war era, Assad apparently moved toward normalization with the same Arab countries who had left no stone unturned to bring about his collapse during the war. Days before the collapse of the Assad government, Reuters reported that the United Arab Emirates and the US had discussed with each other in the past months the possibility of lifting sanctions on Assad if he peels himself away from Iran and cuts off weapons routes to Lebanon's Hezbollah resistance movement. Right after the militants took control of Damascus, Israel entered the scene. Seizing on the chaos, the regime conducted large airstrikes to destroy the country's military infrastructure. It also moved to occupy strategic positions inside Syria. The militants, however, watched the Israeli aggression in silence and even spoke of a desire for establishing ties with Israel. Israel has attacked Syria more than 400 times and, despite UN protests, launched a military incursion into the buffer zone that has separated the two countries since 1974. Benny Gantz, leader of Israel's National Unity Party, recently told media that this was an opportunity of historic proportion for Israel. He called on policymakers to develop our relations with the Druze, Kurds, and other groups in Syria, suggesting that Israel may be able to develop relations with groups who have traditionally opposed the coalition of armed opposition that deposed Assad. Such comments by Israeli officials could lay bare the regime's intention for fueling long-running chaos in Syria and ultimately the country's disintegration into smaller pieces. The role of NATO member Turkey should not also be ignored in this mayhem. Officially, Turkey's goal in northern Syria is to prevent Kurdish forces from achieving territorial unity. Now, forces supported by Turkey are moving against Kurdish militias and have captured swaths of northern Syria, including the town of Manbij. The future of Syria now remains in the dark, but Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei sharply dismissed suggestions that the resistance axis would be weakened without Syria. On the contrary, he said, the more pressure you apply, the stronger it becomes. And the more you fight them, the more expanded it becomes.